My name is Eleanor Price, and I am 68 years old. I taught second grade for 3 decades. I keep my house quiet after 10 like our HOA suggests, and I take my tea with honey because sugar makes my hands shake. I was thinking about none of that when I opened my front door and saw 2 suitcases standing in the middle of my living room like unwelcome guests who had let themselves in. The refrigerator hummed louder than usual. My favorite armchair had been nudged 2 feet off its mark, the little grooves in the rug like skid tracks. A woman's purse, my daughter-in-law's cherry red, sat open on my coffee table, a lipstick rolling against the rim of my old photo frame as if testing the glass for cracks. From my kitchen came the wet pop of a plastic dome as someone lifted a deli container. I stepped inside and pushed the door shut with my heel. The click sounded final. Jenna turned, a carton of grapes in one hand, my refrigerator door yawning behind her like a dare. Mark, my son, was bent over one of the suitcases, the metal zipper teeth bright and confident in my lamplight. "Mom," he said, as if I had arrived early to my own house. Jenna's gaze slid to the small carry-on by my door, mine, packed for a weekend at the coast with my knitting group. She gave a short, amused breath and tilted her head. "Old lady," she said, not even looking at me. "Did you get the owner's permission for that?" Heat rose through me, a clean, stunned heat, like standing too close to the oven when you open it. I didn't answer right away. I watched a bead of grape water slide along Jenna's wrist bone and fall onto my hardwood floor. I listened to the refrigerator complain and to the clock in the hall tick toward the top of the hour. I noticed that my chair, my spot, wasn't where I'd left it. Everything in me wanted to be kind and reasonable and careful. Everything in me also wanted to put those suitcases back on the porch and lock the door. "Close the fridge," I said, and the words came out steady, almost gentle. "We need to talk." I set my keys in the small ceramic dish by the door, the one with a chip on its rim from last Christmas when I dropped it while dusting. The sound they made, metal against porcelain, felt like punctuation at the end of a long, ordinary sentence. I wanted to pause there, in that tiny moment of stillness, before dealing with the 2 people standing in my living room like travelers who'd mistaken my house for an Airbnb. Mark straightened first. He was still wearing his work jacket, the same navy one he's had for years, the sleeves faintly shiny at the elbows. He tried for a smile, the apologetic kind that used to work when he was 15 and late for curfew. "It's just for a couple of nights, Mom," he said, like that solved everything. Jenna, my daughter-in-law, didn't even bother with an apology. She shut the refrigerator door with her hip and looked at me over her shoulder, a grape caught between her fingers. "The remodel started early," she said. "You wouldn't believe the noise. We figured it'd be easier for everyone if we stayed here until it's done." Everyone. I almost laughed at the word. I'd spent the last 10 years learning how to enjoy the quiet of living alone, how to fill silence with things that belong to me. A radio humming, the kettle's sigh, the rustle of pages. Now everyone meant their bags in my hall, their noise in my kitchen, and no one asking first. I walked farther into the room, each step deliberate. My armchair, the one my husband picked out before he died, had been pushed aside to make room for Mark's duffel. I moved it back a few inches, aligning it with the rug pattern the way I always do. "You could have called," I said quietly. "We tried," Mark said. "Went to voicemail." "I was at the pharmacy," I answered, then caught myself. Why was I explaining? Why did I sound like a student defending late homework? "Regardless, this isn't something you just decide." Jenna gave a small, airy laugh. "Oh, come on. It's only temporary. You won't even notice we're here." But I already did. The air felt heavier, full of perfume and conversation waiting to happen, the kind of presence that rearranges a room just by existing. "I notice," I said, I notice very much. Mark sighed, dragging a hand through his hair. Mom, don't make this a big deal. We just need a place to crash. You've got the space. It's not like we're strangers. Not strangers. No, just people who had forgotten how to knock. I'm not upset that you need help, I said, though maybe I was. I'm upset that you assumed you could take it without asking. Jenna put the grapes down and leaned against the counter. You're overreacting, she said, which is a dangerous thing to tell a retired school teacher who spent her life explaining the difference between rules and respect. I turned to the stove. Have you eaten? Mark looked relieved, mistaking my question for surrender. Not yet, we could order in. I'll cook, I said. Old habits die harder than pride. I filled the pot, added chicken stock from the freezer, chopped carrots. The rhythm calmed me, even as the silence behind me pulsed. I could feel them watching me, waiting to see if I'd soften, if I'd laugh it off the way I always used to. When the soup simmered, I ladled it into 3 bowls and carried them to the small kitchen table. It's meant for 2, but I fetched a 3rd chair from the hallway. The scraping legs against tile made me wince. We ate mostly in silence. Mark dipped bread into his bowl, shoulders hunched like he was waiting for the bell to ring. Jenna scrolled through her phone, the light from the screen painting her face in blue. Every few minutes she'd look up, smile politely, and go back to scrolling. You're quiet tonight, Mark said after a while. I'm thinking, I said, about boundaries. He frowned. Boundaries? Yes, the lines between what's mine and what's ours. I kept my voice calm. When you were a boy, I taught you to ask before borrowing. Remember? He gave a small shrug. That's different. It shouldn't be. Jenna sighed. We didn't mean any disrespect. It's just, you live alone. Eleanor. It's not like we're invading. The words stung more than I wanted them to. Living alone had been my quiet triumph, not a flaw. I looked down at the spoon resting in the bowl and saw the reflection of my own mouth, thin and tight. It feels like an invasion when no one knocks, I said softly. Mark pushed his bowl away. I'll fix that hallway switch tomorrow, he said, changing the subject, the way he always does when something gets uncomfortable. Thank you, I said, but that's not the problem that needs fixing. Jenna stood, gathered the bowls, and carried them to the sink. You'll feel better in the morning, she said. It's been a long day. For me, it'll be worse in the morning, I answered, because that will mean you're still here. The air in the room changed then. It wasn't anger exactly, more like the sudden awareness that the air had edges. Mark looked between us. You're serious? I am. Mom, it's late. We'll sort it out tomorrow. We're exhausted. I'm sure you are, I said, but you'll rest better somewhere that's yours. Jenna turned off the faucet and dried her hands, slow and deliberate. If you kick us out, everyone will hear about it, she said. The whole family chat, why, you'll be the villain of the week. I met her gaze. Then let them hear. The clock in the hall ticked once, twice, 3 times. I crossed the room, lifted the smaller suitcase, and wheeled it toward the door. The wheels hummed softly over the rug. I stopped beside the threshold, set the handle upright, and clicked the lock on the wheels so it would stay put. Mark stood frozen. You don't mean this. I do, I said. You can stay tomorrow if we agree on terms, but not tonight. Not like this. Jenna's expression flickered, confusion slipping behind irritation. Fine, she said finally. She grabbed her purse, slung it over her shoulder, and brushed past me. Mark hesitated a moment longer. I'll call you, he said quietly. I hope you will, I said. When the door shut behind them, I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath since I walked in. The refrigerator clicked off, the house returning to its usual hum. I picked up my own carry-on, set it by the door again, and looked around at the neat little world I'd reclaimed. For the first time in years, I realized peace sometimes sounds like the absence of other people's explanations. They left 10 minutes later, but the echo of their presence stayed behind. I watched from the window as the porch light caught the silver zippers on their suitcases. Mark's shoulders were tight, his movements clipped. Jenna's red purse swung sharply against her hip as if the air itself had wronged her. When their car pulled out, the beam of the headlight swept across my living room walls like a flashlight searching for guilt. Then the night went still. The quiet that followed was heavy, but it belonged to me. I stood for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the hallway clock. That clock had ticked through every stage of my life: marriage, motherhood, widowhood, and never once had it sounded judgmental. I leaned my forehead against the cool door and whispered, "You did what you had to do." But my voice cracked halfway through. I walked back into the kitchen. The soup pot was still warm on the stove, a thin skin forming over the broth. I poured it into a container, wiped down the counter, and slid the leftover bread into its bag. Normal motions. Small ones. Teachers know the value of routines. They keep your hands busy when your heart is too loud. The wine bottle stood open on the counter. I picked it up, looked at it for a long moment, then corked it again. No victory toast tonight. I'd already learned that when you do the right thing, it rarely feels like winning. I went to bed around 11. The rain started sometime after midnight, soft at first, then harder, the kind that makes the roof sound alive. I woke once to check the locks, not because I thought they'd return, but because the house suddenly seemed both larger and smaller without anyone else in it. The air smelled faintly of soup and rain. I fell asleep to the sound of the water moving down the gutters. Morning light is forgiving in Oregon. It came through the curtains like something apologizing for last night. I made tea, stirred in honey, and sat at the kitchen table with the paper. I didn't read the headlines. I just liked the sound of pages turning. A white envelope had been slipped under the door. For a second, I thought it might be from Mark, but it was from the Homeowners Association, a reminder about quiet hours and parking regulations. I laughed quietly to myself. Of course, I said aloud. Even the universe is talking about boundaries today. I packed my small carry-on again. The knitting group was meeting at Cannon Beach, and I wasn't about to cancel. I folded sweaters, tucked my book inside, zipped the case shut. Before leaving, I looked around my living room. Everything was in its place. The chair, the photo frame, the rug straightened just so. The order calmed me. The drive to the coast takes 2 hours if you don't stop. I stopped anyway, at the bakery in Banks for a cherry turnover, and at the gas station where the attendant still wears a paper hat. He called me ma'am and wiped my windshield without being asked. People underestimate how grounding a small courtesy can feel. The ocean appeared all at once, that sudden stretch of gray blue that never fails to make me inhale deeper. The sky was a pale sheet of cloud. I parked near the church hall where our knitting group meets once a month. Inside, the air smelled of wool, coffee, and lemon cookies, familiar smells, safe ones. Ruth Coleman, my oldest friend, waved from the back. "You made it," she said, as if she doubted I would. "You look firm." "Firm?" I asked, setting down my bag. "Like a woman who's just laid down the law." She said, "Do I need to pour tea before you tell me?" I smiled because that's what Ruth does. She sees the shape of your day before you've said a word. We settled at the long table, yarn coiled between us like patient snakes. For a while, we talked about nothing. The cold snap, the price of wool, A television show we both pretend to like. Then she looked at me over her glasses and waited. They came over unannounced, I said finally. Bags, groceries, everything. No call, no text, just boom. Ruth's needles paused mid-air. And you told them to leave? I did. How did it feel? Like breathing into a paper bag, I said. Necessary, but not pleasant. She chuckled softly. Boundaries are messy business. You patch them while the leak's small, or you'll drown in your own kindness. I didn't like my tone, I admitted. I sounded sharp. I hate sounding sharp. Ruth shook her head. Sharp isn't cruel. It's clear. Clarity's a kindness, too. I looked down at my knitting. My stitches were uneven, tight, then loose, then tight again. Mark texted once, I said. Said he'd call. He didn't. He will, Ruth said. When he's done being young. He's 42. Exactly, she said. And we both laughed. We knitted in silence for a while, the soft click of needles filling the space like rain on glass. I thought about the years I'd spent making everything easier for everyone, packing lunches, smoothing sheets, offering rides. It had been my default setting: fix, soothe, adjust. I'd mistaken that for love when it was sometimes just fear of losing it. By noon, the sun had pushed through the clouds, weak but real. We walked to the beach after lunch, our shoes sinking into the damp sand. The sea looked endless and indifferent, which is one of the reasons I love it. Standing there, wind in my hair. I realized I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd only drawn a line that should have been there all along. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. The hum of the tires was enough. Traffic was light. The world seemed busy elsewhere. When I reached my street, the maples were shedding the last of their leaves, gold fluttering against gray. I parked, carried my bag inside, and was greeted by that same steady hum of quiet. It no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. There was a message waiting on my phone, not a call, just text, from Jenna. You left your measuring cups in our linen closet. It didn't make sense, but I knew what she meant. She wasn't ready to be gentle, so she found something small to blame. I typed back. Keep them for now and put the phone face down. I made tea again, the same honey, the same cup. I sat in my chair, the one back in its rightful spot, and listened to the house settle around me. The clock ticked. The rain started again, light, rhythmic, forgiving. I thought of Ruth's words, "Clarity's a kindness," and whispered them to myself like a prayer. That night I slept without waking once. 2 weeks passed before my phone finally rang with Mark's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. The call felt like a test I hadn't studied for. When I did, the first thing he said was, "Mom, can we have lunch? Just us." His voice sounded smaller than I remembered, as if something in it had been sanded down. We agreed on Saturday at noon, at the Cedar Mill Diner halfway between our neighborhoods. I'd been there plenty of times, the kind of place where the booths are sticky with history and the waitresses call you Hon. I liked it because no one tries too hard there. That morning I took more care getting dressed than I expected. Nothing fancy, dark jeans, a blue cardigan, but I brushed my hair twice, dabbed a bit of powder on my cheeks, and told myself I was going for soup, not absolution. Still. My hands trembled slightly as I locked the door. I paused on the porch, feeling the cool air, the scent of rain on concrete. It steadied me. When I arrived, Mark was already in a booth near the window, fiddling with the straw wrapper from his water glass. His posture was nervous, almost boyish. He stood when he saw me and hugged me, awkward but sincere. "You look good, Mom," he said. "You look tired," I replied, because mothers notice these things before politeness kicks in. He smiled faintly. Fair. The waitress appeared, pen poised. Her name tag read, Bonnie. I ordered clam chowder and black coffee. Mark asked for the meatloaf special with mashed potatoes and coleslaw. When she left, the silence between us expanded until it touched both walls. I shouldn't have just shown up like that, he said finally. I didn't think it through. It was stupid. I nodded but didn't rush to fill the space. You made a choice, I said, and I made mine. He stared down at his hands. Jenna was the one who said we could stay with you. She made it sound easy, like you'd like the company. I didn't stop to think how it would feel for you. Company's nice when it's invited, I said. Not when it walks in carrying 2 suitcases and a sense of entitlement. Mark winced but didn't argue. She feels awful, by the way. She gets defensive when she's uncomfortable. That comment about you needing permission, that was sarcasm gone wrong. I stirred my coffee. The spoon clinked, once, sharply. Sarcasm always lands hardest on the person who didn't deserve it. He sighed. I told her that. We let the noise of the diner fill the silence, the hiss of the griddle. Bonnie calling out, "Order up," the hum of old neon outside the window. I watched a father help his little girl pour syrup over pancakes and wondered if he realized how fleeting that kind of dependence is. Mark cleared his throat. After we left, Jenna and I argued. I told her you were right, that we should have asked. She thought I was just trying to take your side, but she came around. I looked at him. That must have been a long conversation. 3 nights, he said. But it helped. We realized we've been treating everyone like part of our convenience schedule. Friends, neighbors, even each other. Bonnie returned with our food. She set down Mark's plate first, then my bowl of chowder, steam curling up between us like a truce offering. Mark handed her his card before we'd even started eating. Put it all on me, he said. Please. When she left, I smiled. That's unnecessary. It's overdue, he said. I tasted the soup. It was creamy, peppery, comforting. For a moment, I could almost forget why we were there. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about when I was a kid. You always worked 2 jobs. I never realized what that did to you. It did what it had to, I said. He shook his head. It made you the kind of person who keeps everything running, and I guess I assumed you'd always be there to make things easy. Habit's a powerful thing, I said. So is gratitude. One can exist without the other, but they shouldn't. He looked up, eyes wet but steady. I'm sorry, Mom, for the words, for the presumption, for putting you in that position. I set down my spoon. Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. Not explanations, just ownership. We ate in easier silence after that. The clatter of dishes became background music to forgiveness. When we were nearly done, Bonnie refilled my coffee and slid the bill back to Mark. He signed it quickly and nodded at me. Jenna wants to stop by next week, he said carefully. To bring back your measuring cups and maybe apologize herself. That would be kind, I said. But tell her to call first. He smiled at that, a small, rueful grin. Call first. Ask first. Respect the no. I remember. Good, I said. It's a family motto now. When we stepped outside, the sky had turned that familiar Portland gray that looks soft until it starts to drizzle. Mark opened his umbrella and held it over both of us as we walked to our cars. For a moment, it felt like balance. 2 adults under the same patch of shelter, each holding a share of the handle, at the cars. He hugged me again, tighter this time. You did the right thing, he murmured. So did you, I said. Eventually. We both laughed, the sound light and clean. Back home, the house greeted me with its usual quiet. I set my purse on the console, toed off my shoes, and walked to the window. The maple trees were nearly bare now, their branches drawn in black lines against the dull sky. I could see Mr. Alvarez across the street checking his mailbox. He glanced up, spotted me, and raised a hand. I waved back. Small rituals, small proofs that we exist. On the kitchen table sat the half-finished scarf from the knitting trip. I picked it up, felt the yarn between my fingers. Each loop was a record of a moment I'd refused to apologize for being myself. I thought about Ruth saying, "Clarity's a kindness," and added silently, "So is consistency." That night, I reheated the last of the soup and poured a small glass of that same white wine. I ate slowly, letting the flavors settle. The chair was back where it belonged. The lamp chain ticked when I pulled it. Outside, rain tapped gently on the window. Before bed, I opened my phone and typed a short message to Mark. "Dinner here next Sunday. Bring Jenna. I'll make pot roast." Then, before I could second guess it, I hit send. Within a minute, 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then, "We'd love that. And we'll bring dessert after we call first." I smiled, turned off the phone, and stood for a moment in the soft dark of my living room. Everything was in its place. Not perfect, but peaceful. The kind of peace you earn by learning where you end and where love begins.